How's it going, everybody? Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio. We are here live every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern. Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, f4wonline.com/YouTube. That is f4wonline.com/YouTube. Click that subscribe button. And, of course, twitch.tv/f4w video. And we are here live today with a lot to talk about. No guest on the program here today. Just me and you. And we have a lot to talk about. I've got a whole bunch of different news stories to get into today, if we have time. But earlier today, I did put a post up on my Twitter, my X, at Bryan Alvarez, just basically asking, have you ever had a precognitive experience? Send your best ones to Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com, and I will read them on the show. And I often make requests. For example, of late, we've had, weird things happen in your hometown. We've had, what are some strange stories maybe your grandparents told you that stuck with you? And, we get emails here and there, but man, I put this one about precognitive experiences up, and I'm bombarded with emails, and you can join in. The email is Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. That is Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. And a precognitive experience would be maybe you had a dream that something was going to happen, and lo and behold, it happened exactly as you dreamed it. I want good ones, not something silly, but if you've got a good one, Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. Doesn't have to be a dream. It can be, man, I just had a feeling that such and such was going to happen, and it happened exactly as I thought. Experiences with precognitive abilities. Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. We'll talk about those. We come back from the break, and plenty more. If you sent emails about anything else, I will get to them. Fear not. So send me those emails. You can also text me, 425-780-7566. Bryan at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. Back in a moment with more After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, every Wednesday live. 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. If you can't listen to the show live, you can always grab the replay with a subscription, f4wonline.com. That is f4wonline.com. If you're a wrestling fan, it's even better because we do 84 wrestling podcasts a month. But you can get After Dark as well. And if you've never subscribed, f4wonline.com/new will get you half off. And you can also subscribe for only the podcasts through Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And you just put all those words after F4W Online. So f4wonline.com/YouTube, f4wonline.com/Apple, f4wonline.com/Spotify. We also have shirts out, f4wonline.com/shirts. Brand new After Dark shirt. Didn't wear it today. Somehow I ended up with a Yoda shirt on, but that's close enough. Also, if you missed last week's show, check it out. Tex Wesson joined us, and we talked a little bit about Bigfoot, but mostly like everything swerved off course when he brought up not deer, which are they're not deer. They look like deer, but they walk on their hind legs. And if there's one thing I can't stand, it's animals that walk on their hind legs, especially when they're not supposed to. So I didn't like hearing about the not deer. And then I did some more research. We got to do a show on this someday. And here's the thing with the not deer, okay? This is what they say. A deer, I don't know if you guys know this or not, a deer walks on 4 legs, okay? And I know that because around here, we actually have deer. I don't live in that rural a place, but, like, there's deer around here. Like, sometimes when we drive down the road, hey, there's a deer crossing the road. And deer can stand on their hind legs. Maybe they're trying to get something up out of a tree. They can briefly stand on their hind legs, which is creepy enough. But that is not a not deer, because a not deer also looks a little bit different, because a normal deer kind of has its ears on the side of its head, but the not deer has its eyes in the front, like a predator. So anyway, I didn't like reading about that one bit. But anyway, today we were talking about a tweet that I sent out on X, where I basically wanted to know if anybody had any precognitive stories they wanted to tell. What does that mean? Well, I explained it in the opening segment, but I've got to address this because we had some questions on the YouTube and the Twitch chat. So a precognitive experience would be you have a dream about something that is going to happen, and then it happens. You have a feeling something is going to happen, and then it happens. Now, we had a very good question, an obvious question, from this fella here on YouTube. He says, well, that happens to me all the time. That's paranormal? I have precognitive thoughts about what's going to happen in wrestling, he says. And then on the Twitch chat here, this fellow says, I get deja vu often, along with delusions of grandeur. Well, that's something different. So, let's talk about precognition and what I'm looking for here, okay? Yes, all of us think, I have a feeling something's going to happen, and then it does. It actually happens to me regularly on this program. Okay, well, we've got a guest scheduled, and I just get this feeling. I'm going to call that number, and they ain't going to answer. And I end up being correct. Why? Well, the reality is that this happens all the time because all day long we have thoughts coming into our brains, and we think all sorts of things. And the fact of the matter is, you think you know something's going to happen all the time, and 99% of the time you're wrong. But you know what? That one time you're right, you remember that. So the point is, there's probably many times I'm doing a show and I'm like, oh man, Michael Oku ain't going to answer today. Something's going to happen. And then he answers, and then you just do the show and you move on. But then there's that one day where you go, I bet you anything that Tex ain't answering today, and you call and he doesn't answer, and you're like, golly, I knew it. I knew it. So as Hollywood Zap here says, you remember the hits and you forget the misses. Exactly. And in fact, when you read about famous psychics, it'll be like, here's a list of hits that the great Kreskin had, or whoever. And you're like, oh my God, he predicted such and such a thing. But then you really read the prediction and you're like, okay, like maybe you could stretch to get that one right. But really, that could have been many different things. So in general, I would say that the vast majority of us are not walking around regularly having precognitive experiences. But maybe you had one where it's like, that one is way too specific. That one is just, that's too much. That one there, that moves into the paranormal. Those are the ones I want to hear. And an example would be Christopher here. Christopher says, I am a disabled Marine Corps veteran. When I was 10, I had a dream I was in a room full of bunk beds with a man who had a giant hat who was screaming in my face. Fast forward 8 years, and I'm in boot camp. Now, you may hear that and think, well, anybody could have a dream and it ends up... But no, this is the difference. The man screaming at him was the exact same man he dreamed about, and the room was the exact same room. So that's different than, I have this feeling I may end up in the military. Next thing you know, you're in the military. You have a dream, you remember the dream, you remember the room, you remember what the man looked like, and then 8 years later, you end up in the same room, and it's the same man from your dream screaming at you. That is what I'm looking for here. That is a precognitive experience. Now, I don't really talk about this a lot on the show, you know, ESP and precognition and that sort of thing, but I am very, very interested in it. There's just really not a lot that comes out in the news. Like, you always hear about, you hear about there's going to be a congressional hearing on UFOs, or, hey, there's a new Bigfoot photo, or, hey, we got our first Loch Ness Monster sighting of 2025. We don't really hear a lot about precognition, but it interests me because it is one of those things that you can't disprove, in the sense that, like, we all have a brain, we all think, we all have a mind, but forget After Dark, forget some guest on Coast to Coast. Go online to any reputable site. You can Google brain or mind or whatever on Wikipedia, and you will find that we don't know anything about our brains. We don't know anything about our minds. There is so much that we don't know, and the idea that, hey, you know what? At some point, sometimes our brain might pick something up or whatever. I think that there's a decent chance that that's possible. And I'm going to read a story, actually, after the break, on the subject of our mind and what we know and don't know about our mind. They actually mapped a mouse's brain, the size of, I forget what they said, but just like a little tiny little portion of the mouse's brain. And what they found in that tiny little portion of a mouse's brain, I think they said there was so much data that it would be like 24 years worth of HD video. There's some crazy amount in this one tiny little kernel of a tiny mouse's brain. And then you think about our brains, and there's definitely things about our brains we don't understand, and probably things that we may be able to do that we don't really know about, because we've never really unlocked the secrets of the mind. But I'll read a little bit about that after the break, and then we'll go into more of these emails, your precognitive experiences. You can send those to me, Bryan, at AfterDarkRadioShow.com. The better the story, I want the good ones. So send those to me. Back in a moment with more Observer Live. Joe Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio. Every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, f4wonline.com/YouTube, and twitch.tv/F4W Video. We're talking about precognition, and I'm going to read this article here in a moment. But first, another email, Brian at AfterDarkRadioshow.com. This here's from Kevin. He says, Brian, I did have a weird happening back in 2001. I was sitting in my room, and my ears sort of popped, the best way I can describe it. I suddenly jumped up, ran to the doorway, and held on, and a few seconds later, while I was trying to figure out why I inexplicably reacted that way, the house started shaking a 4.5 earthquake. I don't know how I had this premonition or why my instincts took control over my mind, but it made me wonder if this sensation is why dogs start howling moments before an earthquake happens. Did my brain waves suddenly sync to the frequency emanating from the earth? Really weird. That's Kevin, who is in California, by the way. That's where that earthquake took place. Well, Kevin, you may be... Actually, you are an animal. But it is not paranormal that animals can they freak out before earthquakes happen. And I mean, this is a known fact, and there's two parts to this, as we're going to talk about here. One is animals freaking out right before the earthquake occurs, and the other is, animals start acting weird a week or month before an earthquake occurs. People claim both of these things, okay? Science acknowledges that 100% in the moments before an earthquake, animals freak out. It's not even a debate. And in fact, you can go to the USGS website, the U.S. Geological Survey, and they have a whole page up. And it says here, can animals predict earthquakes? The earliest reference we have to unusual animal behavior prior to an earthquake is from Greece in 373 BC. Rats, weasels, snakes, and centipedes reportedly left their homes, headed for safety, several days before a destructive earthquake. Anecdotal evidence abounds of animals, fish, birds, reptiles, and insects exhibiting strange behavior anywhere from weeks to seconds before an earthquake. However, consistent and reliable behavior prior to seismic events and a mechanism explaining how it could work still eludes us. Most but not all scientists pursuing this mystery are in China or Japan. We can easily explain the cause of unusual animal behavior seconds before humans feel an earthquake. Very few humans, and by the way, Kevin, it says very few humans, which means some humans do, which probably means you. Very few humans notice the smaller P wave that travels the fastest from the earthquake source and arrives before the larger S wave. But many animals with more keen senses are able to feel the P wave seconds before the S wave arrives. As for sensing an impending earthquake days or weeks before it occurs, that is a different story. So there is a wave that travels that animals and some humans can feel. And so that's probably why moments before it happened, you probably felt the P wave. Moments before it happened, you freaked out. It's letter P, by the way, not urine. He leaped up, ran to the door, and that's exactly what happened. And animals, a lot of animals, can sense the P wave as well. Now, further in advance, that is different. Although, I suppose I'm not an earthquake scientist. I'm pulling this out of thin air here, but I suppose it's possible that perhaps there are P waves that kind of roll, days and weeks in advance of the earthquake, prior to the earthquake hitting. There are aftershocks. Maybe this would be like a pre-shock or something. I'm making all this up, but I'm just making a suggestion here. But perhaps that's one way that animals far in advance of an earthquake might have some idea of what's coming. Now, another thing, I think I might have talked about this once on the show, but this is from the Jerusalem Post. And it says here, following the decision to end cooperation with Russia, due to logistical challenges after the invasion of Ukraine. Scientists at the Max Planck Institute for Animal Behavior, led by Martin Wikelski, will be launching their own satellites as part of the Icarus project, which will observe animal behavior from space. So they're sending up satellites to observe the behavior of goats who they have found become nervous before a volcanic eruption. So essentially what they're hoping is that they can use satellites from space to track these animals, and when the animals start acting weird, okay, evacuate, there's a volcanic eruption or whatever's coming. So this is actual science being done. You could call it precognitive, I guess, but most likely it's just, the ability to feel something. It's just like animals, dog can hear frequencies you cannot. These animals can feel things that you cannot. So in some ways it's kind of precognition, but really it's just, they have the ability to do that. So I was reading a couple of articles, then we'll go back to some emails. Talked before the break about the mouse. So as I load it up here. So what they've done, this is from mindmatters.ai. They took a mouse. It's already funny. And they told this, they didn't tell it, but they had the mouse watch, of all movies, The Matrix. This is a real story, by the way. I'm not making this up. They put a mouse in front of the movie The Matrix, and they created the largest functional map of a brain to date, a diagram of the wiring connecting 84,000 neurons as they fire off messages, okay? Now, this portion of this is a mouse brain, not a human brain. The portion of the mouse's brain was the size of a poppy seed, and the researchers identified the neurons, trace how they communicated via branch-like fibers. They're surprising 500 million junctions in this poppy seed. They assembled a 3D reconstruction, which you can actually, you can go on YouTube, mapping 1 cubic millimeter of a mouse's visual cortex. The New York Times said the human brain is so complex that scientific brains have a hard time making sense of it. A piece of neural tissue the size of a grain of sand, might be packed with hundreds of thousands of cells linked together by miles of wiring. And this took 100 scientists to record the cellular activity and mapping the structure of a cubic millimeter of a mouse's brain, less than 1% of the entire brain. And in accomplishing this feat, the feat of a poppy seed-sized portion of a mouse's brain, they amassed 1.6 petabytes of data, the equivalent of 22 years of nonstop high-definition video. That is how much information is contained in a poppy seed-sized portion of a mouse's brain. So anyway, then we got talking about a human brain. And, I mean, I don't mean to be that guy, but, like, if you go out in, like, the real world and you look at, like, people and how they drive and etc., it doesn't seem like much is going on a lot of the time. But there's a lot going on. And there's probably a lot going on that we don't know about. And there may be abilities that the mind has that we haven't discovered yet. And before you scoff, there's another story I'm going to read right here. How many of you have experienced lucid dreaming? I guess I should explain lucid dreaming for you noobs. Lucid dreaming is basically you go to sleep, and for most of us, a few things happen. Sometimes we sleep all night and we feel like we had no dreams, which we did, but we don't remember them. And then, of course, some of us, they have their dreams. They wake up, they remember their dreams, write them down in the dream journal, whatever. And that's most people's normal evening. However, some people, sometimes, and this actually has happened to me, you are dreaming and you suddenly realize that you are dreaming. So you have not woken up yet, you're still asleep, and you're still experiencing the dream, but you are aware that you are dreaming. As opposed to, you have a dream and then you wake up and you remember your dream or whatever. You're actually aware of being in your dream. And, usually when it happens to me, it's kind of like, and it's very rare. I mean, it's only happened a few times. But the time it's happened, sometimes it's like, for a while you can kind of control what's happening in your dream. Other times it's like you can't. You're just kind of observing what happened, but you're aware that you're dreaming. So this is called lucid dreaming. And I'm going to read an article when we come back from the break. And this article just came out 5 days ago. They are just now figuring out what happens to people when they experience lucid dreaming. It's something that happens. It has been studied, and they've discovered a lot about it. So we'll talk about that after the break and take more of your emails at brian@AfterDarkRadioShow.com. Your precognitive experiences. Back in a moment. After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Here After Dark Radio. Every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, f4wonline.com/YouTube. Holy smokes. Right as I'm giving the plugs here, I got a breaking news from the Seattle Times. A big PNW quake, that's Pacific Northwest, could cause land to sink in minutes, new study says. Great. That sucks. Well, anyway, we struck a gold mine with this topic here today because producer Jared here says he lucid dreams all the time. That right, Jared? Yeah. And then got a bunch of people here on the chat. This person says, I hate having dreams that end in cliffhangers and you can't continue the dream when you go back to sleep. That's the worst. That's the worst. I get mad when I wake up, this person says. I try to get back into the dream. It doesn't happen. Actually, that'd be a good topic for the show. Have you ever woken up from a dream? And come to think of it, I think I might have been able to do this once or twice. You wake up from a dream and you go back to sleep and the dream continues. How many people have had that happen? That if it happens, it's very unusual. But I feel like I've had it happen once or twice. And it kind of makes you wonder, like, like no one really knows what dreams are, the point of them or anything like that. There's all these theories and everything, but no one really knows. It's kind of like, why does your brain behave like that? It creates this incredible scenario or dream or while you're flying on another planet or whatever, and then like you wake up, but when you go back to sleep, like a whole new one starts. Why didn't you go back to the other one? Good questions here. I know often, like, I don't remember a ton of dreams, but like, I'll remember dreams. It's always a dream about wrestling or doing jiu-jitsu. If I dream about either of these things, I wake up just drenched in sweat. And so then I always ask myself, like, was it too hot in the room? And like, I started sweating. And then because I was sweating, my brain had a dream about wrestling or jiu-jitsu? Or did I have a dream about it? And like, you know, your heart rate started and you start, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. We had a couple of those. And then what else do we have here? Oh, this one. I don't think this guy's making up this story because he keeps chatting and he seems serious. He goes, in 2019, I pulled up to work around 4 a.m. And as I parked, a voice in my head yelled, "Get in the building!" So I got in the building, and 3 minutes later, someone drove by, shot up my car, 3 houses, 2 bullets through my driver's seat. I'd probably be dead. That is a precognitive experience right there. Because I don't think normally people have the voice in their head telling them to rush into the store. But anyway, we were talking about lucid dreaming, which if you missed the last segment, this is that dream that you have where in the middle of the dream, you suddenly realize you're in a dream. Maybe you can control the dream, maybe you can't, but like you're aware while sleeping that you're dreaming. So new research, it says, it's from the debrief, offers the most comprehensive look yet at what occurs in the brain during lucid dreaming, a unique state in which a person becomes aware that they are dreaming while the dream is still unfolding. This was a study led by Kagate Demirel of the Donders Center for Cognitive Neuroimaging, and they described the largest data set on lucid dreaming to date. Large-scale approach enabled robust comparison between lucid dreaming, REM sleep, and wakefulness. REM sleep would just be, you're out, and wakefulness is you're awake. Study concluded lucid dreaming is not merely a blend of sleeping and waking consciousness. So what that means is, we normally think you're either deep in sleep or you're awake. But if you're deep in sleep and aware, well, it's just like a combination of those two things. You're just aware that you're sleeping. But as it turns out, it is not. It is a distinct state of awareness with its own unique neural signature. Researchers discovered lucid dreaming is marked by unique activation and communication between specific brain regions, patterns that differ notably from those observed in non-lucid REM sleep or typical awakeness. One of the most compelling discoveries was the increased activity in brain areas associated with self-awareness, memory processing, cognitive control, regions typically less active during REM sleep. These results suggest that during lucid dreams, the brain enters a hybrid state in which immersive dream experiences coexist with the reflective awareness more commonly associated with wakefulness. So it is an intricate state of consciousness. And by the way, if you really want to have something to read about tonight, go Google consciousness and find out how we take a lot of stuff for granted, like being conscious, and nobody has any idea what this means, how it arises, what is consciousness, are tables conscious? I mean, there's so many questions. There's so little about the brain that we actually know. People take for granted, oh, my mind is just my brain. Well, it's a lot more than that. And there are actually two schools of thought about the mind. There is the camp that argues that the mind, when you think of yourself, your mind, it is all physical. It's your brain thinking certain things and creating this illusion, and that's all the brain is. It's a completely physical thing. And then there's the dualists who, they look at the mind, and now the mind is separate from the brain. The mind is something different. And if you're thinking this is just some wild, crazy talk, go Google it. And this is science. This is not After Dark Paranormal. Nobody knows anything about the mind, and they don't agree on anything about it. So basically, if I found out that we were able to have precognitive experiences, I don't think I would be surprised. They have done many, many studies looking at ESP, as it used to be called, extrasensory perception. You know, like Ghostbusters, they hold up the cards. What's behind this card? And, you know, they've done all sorts of things. And, you know, the problem is it's very, very difficult. You know, some people do well, but then you can't recreate it. Some people do well until they're in a controlled environment, and then they don't. And so people immediately say, well, that means they must have been doing whatever fake. But, you know, maybe we don't know. We don't know anything. So, yeah, the brain of a mouse and lucid dreaming. Let's go to a couple more of these emails here. Once again, if you've got a story, you can send it to me, Bryan at AfterDarkRadioShow.com. This person here says, probably doesn't qualify as a good one, but it has always freaked me out. This is from Patrick. I never really dream, and if I do, I don't remember it. And by the way, somebody on the chat here, they said that if you put a journal next to your bed, and when you wake up, you just write your dream down, just like write stuff down and then go back to sleep, you'll start to become better at remembering your dreams. Although, sorry to digress from your email, Patrick, but there was a time where I decided I was going to try the deal where you wake up and like you write your dream down because, you know, what am I dreaming about? And can I write it down and then later I'll go, oh, I must have been thinking that or whatever. So like one night I went to sleep and then I guess I woke up and I wrote my dream down or whatever, went back to sleep, woke up, wrote some other dream down, went back to sleep. Wake up in the morning, I don't remember any of the dreams, but I wake up and I'm like, oh, my pad. Let's see what I wrote down. I can't understand a word I wrote. It's just a bunch of scribbling and gobbledygook, so that didn't work for me. But anyway, Patrick says, don't remember my dreams. A couple of years ago, I had this really vivid dream where I was trying to escape from some faceless thing that was trying to kidnap me. I ended up getting away, but in the process got this huge cut on my right hand that went from my palm to my middle finger. I woke up, nothing changed, but less than a week later at work while washing dishes in the bar, I cut my hand in the exact same spot where it was in the dream, albeit not as deep. Didn't end up kidnapped, but it did always stick with me. That's a good one. That's a good one. You know, it could be a coincidence, but that's, you know, the more specific it is, the more you can say, all right, well, maybe that was some precognitive dream. But to have a dream about a very specific cut on your hand and then a week later, the exact same thing happens, that is a pretty good one there. This person here says, Sean here, I had a recurring precognitive vision a couple of years ago. I had just started dating my girlfriend in the summer of 2022. For a while, I would get really bad anxiety sleeping at her place. I would always get really anxious and paranoid my house would catch on fire. Which is ironic, he says, as my gimmick as a pyromaniac. At the time, I had no neighbors. So the thought of a house fire starting really worried me because no one would be near to see and call 911. Sometimes my anxiety would get so bad, I would get up and actually go to my house in the middle of the night. Well, come the morning of the 4th of July, I have 20 missed calls from my mom, and my girlfriend wakes me up and hands me her phone. My mother heard sirens near my house, which was 3 blocks away, checked her emergency response app, and saw my address with residential fire alongside it. She rushed to the house and confirmed my wooden deck had caught fire. Thankfully, my neighbor across the street happened to have the day off and was outside pulling weeds, kept hearing a crackling sound, which he eventually got fed up hearing, checked to see if I was doing something, only to see the deck fully ablaze. My deck is connected to my living room. Had she not had the day off for holiday, she would not have been outside. My house would have been 100% lost. And he's actually got photos here of the damage from this fire. And, yeah, 4th of July, outside, woods. I mean, I think we know why the fire started. But still had a precognitive dream about it over and over. And then it happened. This person here, Omega, I believe, didn't know it was a word for this, so thank you for that. I don't believe in these kinds of events before this happened. I had a dream I was at my great-grandmother's house. She was the nucleus of the family, so everyone was always at her house. She came to the door. She had died about a year before this, by the way. She told me, "You need to tell Shawanda, my mother, to call Gloria, my grandmother." I asked if she wanted to come in and tell her, but she said no, so I told her I will. She asks, "How you doing?" I told her. She said, "I love you." She left, and the dream went on. So when I woke up, I called my mom, and I attempted to tell her, but she brushed it off, saying she was busy right now, and she would call me back. I ended up going to her house later after I got off work. I normally try to go to her house at least once a week. The conversation about the dream came up, and I told her what happened. It's about 7:30 our time, 8:30 where my grandmother is. So she went and called my grandmother. They have a conversation. My mother brings up the fact that I had the dream, so she felt like she needed to call. They laughed it off. My grandmother said she was fine, and she appreciated the call. I distinctly remember hearing my grandmother say, "Well, I'm about to get in the shower. I'll talk to you tomorrow." So the next day, it's about 3. My mom calls me saying my auntie called her, saying she tried to get with my grandmother, but she hasn't responded. I head over to my mom's house. My aunt ended up calling about an hour later, saying my grandmother had died. My mother asked what happened. My auntie said she died sitting in the bed. She wrapped in a towel. I guess she just got out of the shower. Me and my mother talk about it all the time. It still freaks me out that this dream of my great-grandmother telling me to tell my mom to call her mom was a precursor to my grandmother dying. And if I hadn't told her, she wouldn't have had the last conversation with her. So that is from Omega, and that is an excellent one. So thank you very much for sending that in. And we got some more here, but I think we're going to run out of time. So, as always, here's how it works on the show. I have a special email address. It is brian@afterdarkradioshow.com. And anything that you send me, it stays right here unread. So if I didn't get to yours today, or if I didn't get to one you sent a few weeks ago, I will get to it, I promise. Spend a lot of time every other week reading emails. Back in a moment with more After Dark Radio Sports Byline Broadcasting Network. Bryan Alvarez here, After Dark Radio, every Wednesday, 2 Pacific, 5 Eastern. And this fella in the chat that told the story about being told by a voice in his head to get in the building says, absolutely, totally serious, can provide news stories and pics. So, it happened. Yeah. He's also got another story here, the lamp story. I'm going to have to read this after we get off. But, I got one other thing I wanted to mention, because a lot of people actually mentioned this in the chat, and I hadn't thought about it, but it's true. If you, I actually won't say it that way. I'll put it this way. A lot of people have noticed that certain sleep aids, you will have very vivid dreams. And Whitney, Paisley, I mean, they have like a kid's NyQuil. There's like a kid's NyQuil if they're not feeling well. I have all sorts of kids' medicines. But for whatever reason, it's always the NyQuil, where if she takes NyQuil before bed, I mean, weird dreams. And I've heard that from a lot of people. So I certainly don't recommend like going out and experimenting with NyQuil. But maybe just the next time you're going to take NyQuil, be aware of what happened. And see if you, too, have extremely weird, bizarre, vivid dreams after taking NyQuil. I don't know what's in it, but something in there. This person says old school Sudafed would make me sleepwalk. Actually, last night, in the middle of the night, my daughter stumbled into the room, and she's like, Daddy, she's just talking in tongues. I was like, what do you want? I'm sleeping. She goes, she's just babbling. And I was like, go back to bed. And so she just left and like went back to bed. And this morning, no memory of it whatsoever. So she might have slept walk last night. That was some vivid dream. We are out of time. I want to thank everybody who participated today. This show, it doesn't happen without your participation. So thanks so much. We'll have a guest on next week. We'll do emails the week after. And tell your friends about After Dark Radio, Sports Byline Broadcasting Network, YouTube, Twitch, and F4WOnline.com. Thanks, everybody, for listening over to the studio. We'll talk to you next time. Wrestling Observer Live.